It all started about 2 years ago. At that time, another major project was nearing completion at our company. As usual, we did not meet the deadlines, and we had to return home almost by midnight, completely exhausted. I only had enough strength to drink a bottle of beer and, without waiting for the end of the evening news, fall asleep. I never complained about a dream, especially during periods like this. The alarm clock was supposed to ring at exactly 6, so that by 6:30 I could finally slide out of bed and start a new hard Labor Day. But I had to wake up much earlier. My eyes remained closed, and for some time I could not understand what caused a sudden awakening, and suddenly I felt that there was someone in the room. That is, now we can say with confidence that someone was there. Then it was only some uncertain feeling, which is difficult to put into words, lying facing the wall on the very edge of the spread sofa. I felt like someone was standing behind me in the very corner. On the one hand, I could not know if there was anyone there, and there could not be anyone there. Yes, it could not. No sounds came from the corner, and yet I somehow perceived the presence of some other person's creature in some unknown way. I can assume what you will say now. All the psychiatrists who advised me on this issue said the same to me. Many people have a similar feeling at times. It seems to them that they feel someone's gaze behind their back, etc., etc. If this feeling had ended, I would have gladly agreed with you. But after that, steps were heard after standing for a few seconds near the closet, as if so that I could fully realize the presence of someone else's. It went to the kitchen. The gate was not careful. An unknown person, apparently, felt like a master and did not even try to hide his presence. These were the steps of a single man who suddenly went to the toilet in the middle of the night. I want to say that the sounds were quite distinct, but I didn't hear them in the sense that people usually hear. I felt the steps. I felt as if sounds, bypassing the organs of hearing, penetrated directly into the brain. Witnesses describing the experience of telepathic communication claim that the voice of the interlocutor was heard right in the head. In the same way, I perceived the presence of this creature. The steps seemed to be born in my brain, and at the same time it was possible to clearly imagine the place from where they come. In the same way I felt, rather than heard, the click of a switch in the kitchen. There was no fear at that moment. He came later, when the visits of the creature became more persistent and regular. That first time, only a few weak knocks came from the kitchen, as if someone was moving the dishes left on the table. The switch then flicked again, and the steps proceeded back to the cupboard. And then there was a sound that would haunt me in nightmares for the rest of my life. A quiet creak of the door being opened amid the night's silence. For a few minutes I lay waiting to continue, but everything was quiet. Only the alarm clock ticked quietly, and somewhere the alarm let down very far. Finally, assuring myself that it was all a dream, I calmed down, and in the morning the incident seemed to me trifling and ridiculous. Loaded with work, I practically forgot about this case and remembered only 2 months later. Then I returned home quite late with some festivities and a little feed, and hastily throwing off my clothes, fell into bed. As you guessed, I woke up again long before dawn, which was quite surprising in my condition. Through the closed door of the bathroom came a muffled murmur of water pouring from the tap. At first, I didn't even pay much attention to him Alcohol did its job, dragging me into the abyss of sleep filled with scraps of dreams. In the morning, most likely, this incident would have been forgotten. Like what happened earlier. God, how naive people are. Sleep was ready to accept me again in the desired arms, when suddenly there was a quiet splash, as if someone was washing their hands. Breathless, I listened. Plask repeated himself. Then the murmur subsided. I directly felt it twisting the tap. Although I naturally could not hear it, there was a strange feeling. Then the door opened. Damn it. I'm ready to swear anything that through tightly compressed eyelids I've discerned a light. That's not bright. The switch flicked, and at that moment the fear scratched in the depths of the heart. For the first time previously, you could still take comfort in the fact that all the sounds come from the apartments above or below, although our house is old, with thick brick walls. If even some noise made its way through powerful ceilings, they were too weak. Of course, a blurred consciousness could complete the picture itself, but when I clicked the switch, I realized that everything was happening in my apartment because I heard another sound, very weak. He was at the limit of hearing, but he cannot be confused with any other. The fact is that in the switch near the bathroom, with each click, a receding spring rings. This ringing is very quiet, and if you do not know about it, then most likely you will not hear it, at least in the afternoon. But now at night, in absolute silence, when even no sound was heard from the street, it sounded quite clear. I give my head to cut off that I heard a damn spring rattle. There are literally a few steps from the bathroom door to the bedroom entrance, and by taking these steps, something froze on the doorstep. Describing the first case, I forgot to mention that the sounds of the steps were quite strange, not quite human. The legs slapped on the floor, as if the man walking was shod in flippers, and at the same time, not too loud, just a quiet slam. But I'm sure just a barefoot person doesn't walk like that. So, stopping at the entrance to the bedroom, it froze for a while. I imagined it looking at me. Then, after a few languishing seconds, the flip-flops proceeded to the closet. The door creaked twice, something fluttered inside, and finally, everything subsided. Thank God that I was drunk. Otherwise, I could not have fallen asleep until the very morning, but intoxicated. After a few seconds, he was already snoring, forgetting about his fear. After this incident, for the first time, I decided to talk about what was happening. Just mentioned it, half joking. At some party, friends laughed with pleasure at the horror story. Only one unfamiliar girl changed in her face. She somehow looked at me strangely, but not allowing me to develop the topic, she turned the conversation into a different direction. Succumbing to the mood of those around me, I laughed myself. But the next night everything happened again, and in the worst form. This time it went to the toilet. It sounds funny, but believe me, now I have no time for fun at all. At first, slurred grumbling came from the depths of the cabinet, mostly inseparable. It nevertheless gave the impression of some terrible prayer in an incomprehensible, unreal language. The creak of the door with a blade streaked on the nerves, goosebumps ran on the skin. Again, a quiet slam, the door to the toilet opened and closed, and after a few seconds of silence, no murmuring, no creaking of sitting, something proceeded to the kitchen. I stood there, again in complete silence, and returned to the bedroom as on the previous visit. slowing down on the threshold. It suddenly approached the sofa and stopped right next to me. My heart clogged so loudly that it seemed like it could hear. However, as I did my best to pretend to be asleep, I tried to breathe smoothly and deeply. The creature's breath could not be heard, only some sound, a quiet hiss and crackle as the Pataphone hisses on the last track of the record, and smell. The whole room was filled with this smell. It stank like in a damp corner of an old barn, rot, mold, and something else elusive, but just as nasty. I lay on my right side and suddenly felt in horror how it climbed over me. Fitting into an empty space, it turned around, like a cat getting comfortable, and calmed down. Now we were lying literally a few centimeters apart. With great difficulty, I managed to pretend to be sleeping, and I could feel it looking at me without coming off. He looks at the fish eyes with a cold, senseless look as if he knows that I am awake, and tries to catch. The panic attack did not even allow you to open your eyes, and despite that, I still fell asleep very soon. Since then, it no longer returns to the closet. He leaves it, wanders around the apartment for a while, sighing and grumbling in his incomprehensible language, then fits into an empty place. It looks at me. I know what I'm watching until I'm asleep. Strange, but in such cases it is possible to fall asleep quite quickly. At times, the second half of the sofa is busy. You understand what I mean. On these nights it does not appear. Sometimes I am ready to pick up from the street and drag a dirty sleeping beggar into bed just not to hear this creak, and I'm afraid to fold the sofa. Although I don't know what's going to happen, probably it will sink near me, hang out, and go back to the closet. But what if not? Why not lock the closet, you ask? Oh, trust me, I was trying to do that. The door has a simple lock that closes with a small key, just so that the child could not see his New Year's gift ahead of time. One evening I did, but it didn't add to the calm. I had a feeling things only got worse. Something inside said, better open it. But, unfortunately, without heeding the voice of reason and holding the key in my fist, like a chariot, I went to bed and woke up a couple of seconds before it tried to get out. Still immersed in the nap, I heard it push the door. Then again and again. Immediately after that, a whole series of blows came from the closet. The rest of my sleep instantly flew off me. After rubbing my key in my sweaty palm, I waited in horror for what would happen next. They hit the door several more times, all persistently and persistently. They did not drum into it, asking to open. The blows were deaf and not so frequent, as if someone was beating his shoulder, trying to break down a miserable barrier. And when it already began to seem that with the next push, the door would fly out, it unexpectedly calmed down. I decided that it calmed down when suddenly there was a terrible scream from the closet. Half-rick, half-mouthed, it was filled with despair, nightmarish supplication, and malice, wild, endless malice. At that moment, I myself was ready to scream in a bad voice and jump out onto the site. Knocking out the front door, I was restrained only by the wild horror, which tightened the whole body with tight tourniquets. There was no strength to even throw back the blanket. With my teeth clenched and my head clenched, I expected it to break out of its precarious prison now and pounce on me. If at least one more sound came from the closet, I would wet myself or remain a stutter for life, or maybe both together, but it's gone. It was not possible to fall asleep this night, so he lay until dawn, clutching in his right hand the masket that almost killed me. As soon as it was light enough in the room, I went past to the kitchen, and having poured a full glass of vodka, I drank in a volley, sniffing with my hand, smelling of sweat and copper. On my bent legs I trudged to the closet. The key turned in the well with the click of the cocked trigger. Amazed at my courage, or rather madness, I opened the door. There was, naturally, nothing inside. That is, nothing terrible or strange. A pair of hanger suits, an old leather jacket, some small boxes of different junk, and a burnt iron, and some kind of flap stuck to the back of the door, crumbling into dust. At the first touch, I spent the next few nights with friends. I lied about the started repair, but you can't forever wander around other people's apartments. And, expecting the worst, I still returned. On the first night spent at home after trying to lock the closet, it touched me at first. As always, I stood near the sofa, hanging over me and grousing deftly. Sometimes I think I distinguish in this grumbling familiar syllables. At times his muttering becomes more discerning, and then it seems to me that it is trying to pronounce my name, climbing over me. It fell on my chest with a load of huge. At first it lay without moving, and suddenly it stretched out to me something cold and long, resembling a snake through a thin blanket. It tickled my hand, as if a lot of big bugs were crawling over it. And then it touched the face. The touch was nasty. It wasn't a feeling like someone touching your nose, cheek, or lips. It touched the whole face at once, at the same time. It groped me with dozens of slippery little cilia, as if cold sleet was falling on my face. Why didn't I throw out the closet? I don't know. I can't. Somehow it scares me more than night visits. At least nothing bad has happened yet. You won't believe it, but I'm very scared. Me, a man who went through to hot spots and made more than 30 parachute jumps. A few years ago, fell through the ice, and only thanks to the cold mind of the survivor, I'm scared. Every night when I go to bed, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of my fear. I'm afraid this time. Waking up in the middle of the night, I can no longer bear the feeling of deep horror and open my eyes.